I was reading a bit of a book by Krishnamurti called Fire in the Mind, and there was a bit in there about listening. He said, those who are passionate to find out, who want to hear, will listen, not to me. And then he said, it's in the air. And I think that's the subtle hearing of insight and seeing of insight. And I sort of realized that seeing in that way is harvesting insight and giving voice to it. Seeing those subtle things. I can see what I'm saying, but it's hard to really put words to it. And then I also realized, in a way, I'm harvesting my mania right now, even though I'm not in the state of mania. I feel like I'm doing everything I would be doing if I was really manic, but I don't feel manic. So I guess I'm embodying my mania, but I'm also talking about stuff, and I'm taking pictures of my notebooks and posting it on my blog at a later date. And that's something I would totally do if I was just really manic. I would think, wow, this is so profound, I need to share it. And I'm not even thinking it's so profound, I need to share it. I'm just sharing it for the heck of it. To really not have any buildup of anything. Partially because I just forget. So I can't even really think of accumulating stuff and then waiting and then sharing it later. It has to be done right away or not at all. And that's kind of part of how the mind works in the process. So it's just going according to a different unedited process. And that's the thing too, is when one gets into that state of consciousness, it's an unedited state. There's no pre-forming of words and planning what to say. So just really getting with that in every aspect of life. Not thinking anything is worth clinging on to for later. So I'm wondering if I'm in that higher energy state but not feeling it. And I talked about in earlier videos how the neurology grows in ways to be able to contain and harness that energy and not be overpowered by it, because there's more nerve tracks for that. And I don't even know if that's true, but it seems to have some kind of truth to it. So I'm doing these actions that I would do if I was really manic, but I'm not. So in a way, I'm just living that way, congruent with what that energy would animate me to do beyond my supposed control. But the thing is, once I have the nerves for that energy to animate me in that way, it doesn't feel like I'm out of control, because it's not energy beyond that which my nerves can handle, if you know what I mean. So in a way, if I was surfing a wave that was bigger than the one I'd ever surfed before, I might feel like I'm going to fall or I'm out of control. Whereas if I have surfed that same size wave a million times, it's going to feel natural. So it's the same thing with surfing consciousness. That wave of consciousness energy comes in, and the nerves have to get used to moving in those ways. And that consciousness can come in and take over any one of us. So really being able to move with the wave of consciousness is imperative, because if a big wave comes in and takes over even more people, it's going to be really chaotic. So the more we can move towards embodying those gestures and ways of being, the better. And I had the sense that choice is a program, choice itself, and that is the fundamental program. Whereas when that program is gone, then there's just the senses unadulterated by choice. And I feel like what that consciousness is the unknown in a way. So we have to be fully able to sense the unknown and act accordingly, instead of being always projecting our programs and then acting based on that. And one can have access to that energy and be acting and acting and acting with the unknown, and then get to a point where it's beyond the comfort zone of the nervous system, and it gets freaked out and turns back. And I wrote down, there is a possible world filled with love. If we were all filled with love, if we're all moved by love, what kind of world would that create? And I feel like the real app of reality is epigesturetics. Every move we make is recorded in the fabric of reality and moves us towards a certain possibility. But we can choose a different action the next moment if we're always acting based on the movement of love. That doesn't take time to figure that one out. So we can immediately change our path. And I feel like our gestures harvest and uncover that world of love. As we move as love, it's like our bodies are painting that into actuality. It's kind of like carving a sculpture. And as we move in the fabric of love as love, that sculpts us as well. It sculpts our neurology and our body. It's like a game of love. And our body is quantum. It has quantum effects. It makes things possible. It creates. And it has a certain range of motion and gestures. The music of love can play through us. Gestures and words are the notes of the quantum body instrument. Can we go from seeing problems to seeing possibility? And we've been turned into thought processors instead of quantum processors, possibility creators. And our thought process creates a vortex of sound that keeps us separate from the flow of life and that listening, that hearing. We can't hear that subtleness when we're listening to our own thoughts. We're giving voice to the past, so we can't give voice to the moment. And we've superimposed our thought process over life process. And I wonder if freedom is from the pre-formulation of words. And I want to say again that Krishnamurti said that meditation is unpremeditated art. So nothing premeditated, nothing going on in terms of cognition. And I feel like that's a similar way to saying harvest, practice, embody, or practice one's mania in a way. It becomes an art form. So in a way, it's the art of mania. And maybe that's part of map consciousness, is the art of living. There's no formula for living. And if one puts a formula for living, then that's not living, because formulas aren't alive, and human beings and other living things are alive. And I don't think we live in reality, we live in me-ality. And I wonder if our language can be our fruit, a plentiful harvest that we share. The fruit humans produce is language. And right now we're not really making fruit with it, we're making weeds and weed killer. Can our language be of insight and create vision? And I wrote down a peer, as in one peer, and two peer, as in two people. But what I was looking at was a peer is what appears, and to peer is to look deeply into. So a peer to peer is what appears to look deeply into. And I was thinking about that in terms of my brain buddy and wondering what we'll end up talking about. We might talk about our experiences, and there could be commonality there. And it might show in a way that we speak the same language, a language of seeing and experience and seeing beyond experience and what it possibly means, and harvesting the fruit of language differently and sharing it. I wonder if so-called psychosis is fear leaving the system, or fears of leaving the system of thought, because there's some supposed safety in that. It could be fear of change, fear of transformation, fear of breaking out of the chrysalis. It seems like a bit of a tide. This energy comes in, this consciousness, and animates us, and then it goes out, and then when it goes out, all the things on the seafloor are exposed, so they have to be adapted to when there's no consciousness and when there's a lot of consciousness. So in a way, we have to be kind of like barnacles. And our vision gets written over by programs in the structure of thought, like the mental health system. We speak in a different way, and we're speaking a little bit out there and not quite making sense because we're learning a new language of perception. And so afterwards, we learn the language of pathologizing ourselves. But it would be cool to still keep learning this language of perception and being animated by consciousness. It's kind of like when you're a kid and around one parent you know you can be goofy, and around the other parent you know you have to be serious. It's sort of like realizing that we're being subject to certain authoritative structures or not. And I was thinking about falling in gravity and how the body takes over and the senses take over in order to save our life. And I was thinking that the speed of consciousness is kind of like the speed of falling in gravity. It's way faster than thinking. So again, it's just the brain operating at a faster speed, and it's a speed faster than thinking. So when we think that we are our thinking process, then it can be scary because we think we're out of control. But really, it's just faster processing. And then the slow processing of thinking is afraid. And that it's sort of like if somebody falls in gravity and they manage to save themselves somehow, and they realize it was quicker than the speed of thought. They didn't have to think about it. They would just be happy that they managed to save their life. And in that way, when the consciousness comes in, it's happening to save life in a way, because it's life energy itself, this consciousness. And thought is delay, it's dividing up life. And so sometimes we fall in consciousness. And then after it happens, we're all thinking and stuff like, oh, this means I'm ill or something. But it could have been some other mechanism of healing and helping the brain and life and the field of the universe. It's a faster processing. And again, since thought can never be faster than that process of consciousness, we can never really think about it and encapsulate it. So there's no real point. So when it's over, to say that means it's all this mental illness and stuff, that could never capture what actually happened. Or even after something like a terrifying so-called psychosis, just forget about it. And so when we're in that map conscious state, we're being pulled by strings, kind of like puppets of the environment, puppets of perception. Right now we're puppets of thought, we're puppets of the past, but we could actually be puppets of the universe. The word puppet is kind of funny. So being a puppet of the universe is like being fully alive, whereas being puppets of thought is just being a biological robot. And this choice process is very binary. It's good or bad. Whereas the consciousness is animation. It's multi-dimensional animation. Being animated by the sights, the perceptions, the insights, the sounds, the feeling, the smells, everything all at once. So the quantum is a computation of animation, and thought is a contraction of this animation. It tones down the animation by toning the nervous system with sounds. And I feel like we're animated by gravity and consciousness. Just like we can fall in gravity, we can fall in consciousness. And we don't actually fall in consciousness, but it's the faster speed that is faster than thought that renders thought obsolete. And then that's when we're flowing with consciousness. And consciousness is related to gravity because our thoughts contract our nervous system and our muscles and change our center of gravity, and it changes our degrees of freedom in motion and how we gesture in actuality. So less thoughts mean less gravity, means more consciousness and more action and more degrees of freedom in gesture, which gestures in these other realities. And these thought, sounds, images through our nervous system prevent clarity of perception that is needed for the fluidity of action and learning. And I say learning because this perception is its own learning process, and we learn to move as consciousness and as the moment, fluidly, as opposed to moving according to rigid programs. It's actually learning how to be alive in a way. Learning how to move in the field of consciousness, learning how to dance as love